this is time right now. Tick, tock, tick, tock. Never thought about time. What is time?
Time?
Time.
It's hard to define because I can't even imagine a world without time.
Time is
gravity.
Months.
It's subjective.
Days.
Relative.
Hours.
Money.
Minutes.
Time is a funny thing.
Time can either be a best friend or a worst enemy.
In a way, repeats itself. It's cyclical.
Time is something made up by the universe to keep everything from happening all at once.
It's something that I can't touch, but I know is there and is always passing me by.
There's different views of time. There's a cyclical view of time and a linear view of time.
One would be an eschatological notion of time, one that focuses on an eschatology, right? The study of the second coming. Mainly cyclical notions of time are really the majority. Most people have in world history have lived under those notions of time.
The sense of agricultural time is that a farmer has to be dependent on the cycle of the seasons and on the needs of the animals and can't regulate time. As the United States and other cultures started industrializing, and this is also going to be linked with electricity and the electric light, then factory time needs to be regulated.
It was way too crowded. Yeah, and I couldn't hear anyone. So and I was just like, you know, not sure yeah. And it was just like all the way. You know, and I was like.
I heard something about a scientific definition of like the time it takes to get from 2 points.
Time is like a period or duration between like two events. A spatial point to the next spatial point.
Time flows at a certain rate and it doesn't ever stop.
Humans did not have clocks way back when, and to mark the passage of what we call time, humans looked for periodic events. And so, for example, that could be the rising of the sun every 24 hours, the phases of the moon going from a new moon to a first quarter moon to a full moon and back to a new moon over the course of what we would call a month. And on an even longer scale, it could be the changing of the constellations and the stars at night. So when the sun sets, the sky is dark. What are the stars that are up there?
Pretty high.
As in a capitalist society, we define time as in short segments, so we can better divide up the day to figure out how to control labor.
I'm from New York City, so everything's rushed. Like, I mean, still, even here, like, I eat lunch in like 10 minutes.
Over here in the U.S., time is very big. No one wants to have their time wasted. That's a big motto.
Time is money. Time is important. There's not enough of it in one day. Time is really important to me.
I think it's connected with productivity, because capitalism is, we're supposed to be producing stuff all the time. And so I think what makes us very suspicious of time that doesn't seem to be well spent. And I think there often has to be something measurable.
With the move towards a more capitalist type of organization of production, in order to maximize efficiency, especially once factories are created and you're trying to bring all of these people together to produce a particular good as quickly and as efficiently as possible, then time is going to become much more circumscribed. And there's going to be, scheduling is going to become important. Actually, clocks are going to take on a level of importance that they previously had not had. And minutes are going to be important. Seconds, actually, in the medieval period, the early modern period, seconds they're not even really counted in some ways. Everything is really general to even the minute or the hours, certainly in some ways the privileged, emphasized demarcation of time. Well, now in a capitalist economy, especially in the factory, now it's going down to minutes and seconds, where in some ways people have to produce particular kinds of goods within a very strict framework. And so time is, in some ways, is going to make its presence felt in a way that it previously was not.
If I'm at school, time is defined by my classes and the schedule on the time that I'm at school.
From 14 to 18, you're going to be in high school. From 18 to 22, you're going to be in college. From 22 to 25, you got to figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Or you should have already figured out what you're doing for the rest of your life.
Well, I'm a college student, and there's always something to do with my time. Like every minute I could be doing something, being productive, being busy.
You have to be in class at a certain time, you have to be here at a certain time. So to me, I guess it means a lot of things.
Student at Dickinson College, you have your own sense of cycle, right? You have your own understanding of cycle, and it's the fall semester, which happens at the end of August and goes until December. Then you have December break, you have spring breaks, fall pause, and then summer break. You have these understanding of time that is very much scholastically oriented.
In terms of college students, there can often be pressure not to take a year off from college. A lot of students have told me, I really have to come right on to college because that's viewed as the next step to a job. And so if we have to be productive, that means if you have a blank of 2 or 3 years, it's unacceptable. You cannot have a blank.
Who's going to pick me up? You are? I talked to Mark. He said that he doesn't need to do that. They're going to leave it
It means life, because without time, there wouldn't be no living.
As we age, we grow older and older and closer to the end. And I think that's how we kind of measure time.
When you grow up, you begin to, look at it differently because you work much harder. You kind of take that into consideration. You take time into consideration.
Spending as much time as possible because life is so short, like just taking it one day at a time, but doing the most that you can do.
Even though we don't have a clock or a watch or the sky to help us mark time, we all get older. And so we would note in our own bodies that time is passing.
I noticed time passing in terms of my life, actually, with sort of a longer span of time. And sometimes you sort of all of a sudden look in the mirror one day and say, oh my God, you're older. And because of American attitudes towards aging, and particularly in women, you're supposed to defeat time if you're a good American woman. You're supposed to get anti-wrinkle cream, you know? You're not supposed to get old.
We have an interview at 2. Use the term a lot.
This is time.
All the when you're in the majority of White House, you know that's fine. Anybody respect
60 seconds in a minute, and then everything else that follows. I think that's what we've been taught time is.
Something invented by people to help mark different events.
It's the way in which we construct how the day functions.
The reason why time exists, or the reason like we label time, is just to have an answer and kind of.
For example, when Europeans begin to move to the New World, and a lot of these missionaries, say Jesuits or Franciscans or other Catholic missionaries as well as Protestant missionaries, begin to engage with indigenous populations in North America, one of the things that they impose particular new notions of time on indigenous peoples that have this cyclical notions of time, a very different understanding of how time's supposed to work. So one of the ways that say for example the Jesuits attempted to remedy this fact, in some ways to create a rhythmic week for the Indians who didn't have weeks before that. So High Mass would be on Sundays, which was the high point of the week. There was that one day that was highlighted and articulated as being different from the rest, and that would happen every 7 days. Indigenous peoples began to subconsciously or unconsciously buy into the notion that a 7-day week was something that existed when they previously had not known it existed. In that way, indigenous North America was being colonized temporally through time in ways that they didn't even quite realize that it was.
I think there's cultural differences, social class plays an impact, location, like there's so many things that factor into how people perceive time.
I think that our culture definitely perceives time way different than every other culture.
I lived in Europe for a year, and their concept of time is definitely a lot more laid back than ours.
And it's everywhere in Europe. I feel it's different there. People do work hard just like we do here in the United States, but they have more leisure time.
Within these cultures in which you have linear time and cyclical time, which are kind of jumbled together in whatever combination, there are these smaller subsets, these smaller cultures or political economies or economic constraints on how people live their lives temporally.
There used to be little, kind of like this image of little different time zones all over the country. So the same state, I mean, Carlisle could have been on its own time zone, slightly different from Harrisburg.
We in the West tend to look at a clock and say, oh, because we're so focused on punctuality, and other cultures are not so confined by the clock. People will eat when they get hungry, they will go to sleep when they get tired, they'll wake up when they're ready to wake up. And I think in our culture, time in terms, if we think of a clock, does confine us because of how we think about a clock. Clock tells us the time, so we need to follow what the clock says.
Is all relative towards one's perspective, which means what could seem like an eternity for one person can seem like a second for another.
Times I feel like I have all the time in the world to do whatever I want, and it goes by too slow. But I really sometimes wish there were like 28 hours in the day instead of 24.
Time's pretty relative.
Time really does speed up or slow down according to what you're doing.
In a nutshell, Einstein, in relation to time, Einstein was saying that depending on the speed of an object, time will be experienced differently on that object. So I might be sitting here right now, and a friend might be going in a spaceship at some very high rate of speed. If I could take a look at the clock on your spaceship, I would notice it going very slowly. You on the spaceship would notice it going the normal speed. And that's a function of how fast you're moving relative to me. And it's hard to imagine that, because it was hard to believe in the early 20th century when Einstein came up with these theories that this was true, because everyday life we don't see this. But it has been shown to be true.
Time is
the aging process.
Time's pretty relative.
Cultural differences.
Scholastically oriented.
In a capitalist society.
The constellations and the stars.
Industrializing.
Linear time.
It's cyclical.
Universal definition of time is really hard to pin down.